back, Miss Molly here to read another section of the Graveyard Book. Today we're going to read the first part of Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is titled, The Hounds of God. One grave in every graveyard belongs to the ghouls. Wander any graveyard long enough and you'll find it. Water-stained and bulging with cracked or broken stones, scraggly grass or rank weeds about it, and a feeling, when you reach it, of abandonment. It may be colder than the other gravestones, too, and the name on the stone is all too often impossible to read. If there is a statue on the grave, it will be headless or so scabbed with fungus and lichens as to look like a fungus itself. If one grave in a graveyard looks like a target for petty vandals, that is the Ghoul Gate. If the grave makes you want to be somewhere else, that is the Ghoul Gate. There was one in Bod's graveyard. There is one in every graveyard. And then here's an illustration of the Ghoul Gate, Ghoul grave. Silas was leaving. Bod had been upset by this when he had first learned about it. He was no longer upset, he was furious. But why? Said Bod. I told you, I need to obtain some information. In order to do that, I have to travel. To travel, I must leave here. We have already been over this. What's so important that you have to go away? Bod's 6-year-old mind tried to imagine something that could make Silas want to leave him, and failed. It's not fair. His guardian was unperturbed. It is neither fair nor unfair, nobody Owens. It simply is. Bod was not impressed. You're meant to look after me, you said. As your guardian, I have responsibility for you, yes. Fortunately, I am not the only individual in the world willing to take on this responsibility. Where are you going anyway? Out, away. There are things I need to uncover that I cannot uncover here. Bod snorted and walked off, kicking at imaginary stones. On the northwestern side of the graveyard, things had become very overgrown and tangled, far beyond the ability of the groundskeeper or the friends of the graveyard to tame. And he ambled over there and woke a family of Victorian children who had all died before their 10th birthdays, and they played at hide-and-go-seek in the moonlight in the ivy-twined jungle. Bod tried to pretend that Silas was not leaving, that nothing was going to change, but when the game was done and he ran back to the old chapel, he saw two things that changed his mind. The first thing he saw was a bag. It was, Bod knew the moment he laid eyes on it, Silas's bag. It was at least 150 years old, a thing of beauty, black leather with brass fittings and a black handle, the kind of bag a Victorian doctor or undertaker might have carried, containing every implement that might have been needed. Bod had never seen Silas's bag before. He had not even known that Silas had a bag, but it was the sort of bag that could only have belonged to Silas. Bod tried to peek inside it, but it was closed with a large brass padlock. It was too heavy for him to lift. That was the first thing. The second thing was sitting on the bench by the chapel. Bod, said Silas, this is Miss Lapescu. Miss Lapescu was not pretty. Her face was pinched and her expression was disapproving. Her hair was gray, although her face seemed too young for gray hair. Her front teeth were slightly crooked. She wore a bulky mackintosh and a man's tie around her neck. How do you do, Miss Lapescu? Said Bod. Miss Lapescu said nothing. She sniffed. Then she looked at Silas and said, So, this is the boy. She got up from her seat and walked all around Bod, nostrils flared as if she were sniffing him. When she had made a complete circuit, she said, You will report to me on waking and before you go to sleep. I have rented a room in a house over there. She pointed to a roof just visible from where they stood. However, I shall spend my time in this graveyard. I am here as a historian, researching the history of old graves. You understand, boy? Da? Bod, said Bod. It's Bod, not boy. Short for nobody, she said. A foolish name. Also, Bod is a pet name, a nickname. I do not approve. I will call you boy. You will call me Miss Lapescu. Bod looked up at Silas, pleadingly, but there was no sympathy on Silas's face. He picked up his bag and said, You will be in good hands with Miss Lapescu, Bod. I am sure that the two of you will get on. We won't, said Bod. She's horrible. That, said Silas, was a very rude thing to say. I think you should apologize, don't you? Bod didn't, but Silas was looking at him, and Silas was carrying his black bag, and about to leave for no one knew how long. So he said, I'm sorry, Miss Lapescu. At first she said nothing in reply. She merely sniffed. Then she said, I have come a long way to look after you, boy. I hope you are worth it. Bod could not imagine hugging Silas, so he held out his hand, and Silas bent over and gently shook it, engulfing Bod's small, grubby hand with his huge, pale one. Then lifting his black leather bag as if it were weightless, he walked down the path and out of the graveyard. Bod told his parents about it. Silas has gone, he said. He'll be back, said Mr. Owens cheerfully. Don't you worry your head about that, Bod. Like a bad penny, as they say. Mrs. Owens said, Back when you were born, he promised us that if he had to leave, he would find someone else to bring you food and keep an eye on you, and he has. He's so reliable. Silas had brought Bod food, true, and left it in the crypt each night for him to eat, but this was, as far as Bod was concerned, the least of the things that Silas did for him. He gave advice, cool, sensible, and unfailingly correct. He knew more than the graveyard folk did, for his nightly excursions into the world outside meant that he was able to describe a world that was current, not hundreds of years out of date. He was unflappable and dependable, and been there every night of Bod's life, so the idea of the little chapel without its only inhabitant was one that Bod found difficult to conceive of. Most of all, he made Bod feel safe. Miss Lapescu also saw her job as more than bringing Bod food. She did that too, though. What is that? Asked Bod, horrified. Good food, said Miss Lapescu. They were in the crypt. She had put 2 plastic containers on the tabletop and opened the lids. She pointed to the first. Is beetroot barley stew soup? She pointed to the second. This is salad. Now you eat both. I make them for you. Bod stared up at her to see if this was a joke. Food from Silas mostly came in packets, purchased from the kind of places that sold food late at night and asked no questions. No one had ever brought him food in a plastic container with a lid before. It smells horrible, he said. If you do not eat the stew soup soon, she said, it will be more horrible. It will be cold. Now eat. Bod was hungry. He took a plastic spoon, dipped it into the purple-red stew, and he ate. The food was slimy and unfamiliar, but he kept it down. Now the salad, said Miss Lapescu, and she unpopped the top of the second container. It consisted of large lumps of raw onion, beetroot, and tomato, all in a thick vinegary dressing. Bod put a lump of beetroot into his mouth and started to chew. He could feel the saliva gathering and realized that if he swallowed it, he would throw it back up. He said, I can't eat this. It's good for you. I'll be sick. They stared at each other, the small boy with tousled mousy hair, the pinched pale woman with not a silver hair out of place. Miss Lapescu said, You eat one more piece. I can't. You eat one more piece now or you stay here until you have eaten it all. Bod picked out a piece of vinegary tomato, chewed it, and choked it down. Miss Lapescu put the tops back on the containers and replaced them in the plastic shopping bag. She said, Now, lessons. It was high summer. It would not get fully dark until almost midnight. There were no lessons in high summer. The time that Bod spent away, he spent in an endless warm twilight in which he could play or explore or climb. Lessons? He said. Your guardian felt it would be good for me to teach you things. I have teachers. Letitia Barrows teaches me writing and words, and Mr. Pennyworth teaches me his complete educational system for younger gentlemen with additional material for those post-mortem. I do geography and everything. I don't need more lessons. You know everything then, boy. 6 years old and already you know everything. I didn't say that. Miss Lapescu folded her arms. Tell me about ghouls, she said. Bod tried to remember what Silas had told him about ghouls over the years. Keep away from them, he said. And that is all you know, da? Why do you keep away from them? Where did they come from? Where did they go? Why do you not stand near a Ghoul Gate, eh, boy? Bod shrugged and shook his head. Name the different kinds of people, said Miss Lapescu. Now. Bod thought for a moment. The living, he said. The dead. He stopped. Then, cats? He offered uncertainly. You are ignorant, boy, said Miss Lapescu. This is bad. And you are content to be ignorant, which is worse. Repeat after me. There are the living and the dead. There are day folk and night folk. There are ghouls and mist walkers. There are the high hunters and the hounds of God. Also, there are solitary types. What are you? Asked Bod. I, she said sternly, am Miss Lapescu. And what's Silas? She hesitated. Then she said, he is a solitary type. Bod enjoyed the lessons. When Silas taught things, it was interesting. Much of the time, Bod didn't realize he had been taught anything at all. Miss Lapescu taught in lists, and Bod could not see the point to it. He sat in the crypt, aching to be out in the summer's twilight under the ghost moon. When the lesson was done, in the foulest of moods, he fled. He looked for playmates, but found no one, and saw nothing but a large gray dog which prowled the gravestones, always keeping its distance from him, slipping between gravestones and their shadows. The week got worse. Miss Lapescu continued to bring Bod things she had cooked for him: dumplings swimming in lard, thick reddish-purple soup with a lump of sour cream in it, small cold boiled potatoes, cold garlic-heavy sausages, hard-boiled eggs, and a gray, unappetizing liquid. He ate as little as he could get away with. The lessons continued. For 2 days she taught him nothing but ways to call for help in every language in the world, and she would rap his knuckles with her pen if he slipped up or forgot. By the 3rd day she was firing them at him. French, secours. Morse code, SOS, 3 short dots, 3 long ones, 3 short ones. Night gaunt? This is stupid. I don't remember what a night gaunt is. They have hairless wings and they fly low and fast. They do not visit the world, but they fly the red skies above the road to Gulheim. I'm never going to need to know this. Her mouth pinched in tighter. All she said was, Night gaunt? Bod made the noise in the back of his throat that she had taught him, a guttural cry like an eagle's call. She sniffed. Adequate, she said. Bod could not wait until the day that Silas returned. He said, There's a big gray dog in the graveyard sometimes. It came when you did. Is it your dog? Miss Lapescu straightened her tie. No, she said. Are we done? For today. You will read the list I give you tonight and remember it for tomorrow. Miss Lapescu's lists were printed in pale purple ink on light paper, and they smelled odd. Bod took the new list up onto the side of the hill and tried to read the words, but his attention kept sliding off it. Eventually, he folded it up and placed it beneath a stone. No one would play with him that night. No one wanted to play or to talk, to run and climb beneath the huge summer moon. He went down to the Owens' tomb to complain to his parents, but Mrs. Owens would not hear a word against Miss Lapescu on, as far as Bod was concerned, the unfair grounds that Silas had chosen her, while Mr. Owens simply shrugged and started telling Bod that his days as a young apprentice cabinet maker, and how much he would have loved to have learned all about the useful things that Bod was learning, which was, as far as Bod was concerned, even worse. Aren't you meant to be studying anyway? Asked Mrs. Owens, and Bod squeezed his fists together and said nothing. He stopped off into the graveyard, feeling unloved and underappreciated. Bod brooded on the injustice of it all and wandered through the graveyard, kicking at stones. He spotted the dark gray dog and called to it to see if it would come over and play with him, but it kept its distance, and Bod, frustrated, threw a lump of mud towards it, which broke on a nearby gravestone and scattered earth everywhere. The big dog gazed at Bod reproachfully, then stepped away into the shadows and was gone. The boy walked back down the southwest side of the hill, avoiding the old chapel. He did not want to see the place that Silas wasn't. Bod stopped beside a grave that looked the way he felt. It was beneath an old oak that had once been struck by lightning, and now was just a black trunk, like a sharp talon coming out of the hill. The grave itself was water-stained and cracked, and above it was a memorial stone on which a headless angel hung, its robes looking like a huge and ugly tree fungus. Bod sat down on a clump of grass and felt sorry for himself and hated everybody. He even hated Silas for going away and leaving him. Then he closed his eyes and curled into a ball on the grass and drifted into a dreamless sleep. And that concludes the first section of Chapter 3. Tune in next week for the next part of the chapter. Bye.